"I'm not beautiful enough," wept native woman. Rancher held her. "You're the beauty I waited for." The prairie breathed in long sighs as evening leaned against the spine of the western hills. Dust curled upward from the wagon tracks outside town, settling like soft ash upon the clapboard buildings and the weary faces that passed beneath them. The sun was lowering, slow and heavy, burning itself into a deep red against the horizon. Light struck the church bell, and its shadow stretched across the street like a blackened arm reaching for someone who would not come. On the wooden steps of that church sat a young woman, her shoulders curved inward as though she carried too many winters upon them. She was 23, though her eyes looked older, carved by losses that had no calendar. Her hair fell in loose braids, strands escaping in wind, and the dress she wore bore the faded colors of long washing and little care. Her lips moved with words that seemed meant for no one, broken confessions that scattered into the dusk. "I'm not beautiful enough." It came out like a prayer turned sour, as though she had once believed it might be denied, but now said it only to wound herself before the world could. Tears rimmed her lashes, but she held them back, biting them like a bit in a horse's mouth. The town kept walking past, mothers herding children, men with hats low over their brows, and not one stopped to comfort her. She had not been here long. The girl's brother had left her in this town, trading her labor to a storekeeper for a handful of silver and whiskey. He had spoken loud enough for the others to hear when he said she was no use for marriage, not pretty enough to catch a man's eye, not strong enough to fetch a price. Then he had ridden off into the dust, not once turning to see if she wept. The storekeeper had taken her in for a time, using her hands to sweep floors and wash linens. But even he, sour and greedy, found little reason to keep her on, muttering that her face did not bring customers in. She had wandered the streets after, asking for work, only to find doors closed before her. Too plain, some said with pity. Too frail, others whispered with scorn. The cruelest did not speak at all, only laughed behind her back as if her hunger was entertainment. And still she endured. Each morning she rose, washed in the creek, braided her hair with trembling fingers, and tried again. She swept stables for a coin. She patched old clothes for a meal. She kept alive on scraps of kindness, though each one seemed more fleeting than the last. When evening fell, she returned to that church step, her quiet place to whisper the shame no one else would carry. It was there, in the silence of a stable one night, that her wound was cut deeper. A ranch hand, tall, broad, and known for his bold words, found her spreading hay for the horses. He leaned against the stall door with a smirk that showed no kindness. He told her she might think herself worthy of a man's hand, but no one in this town would waste a name on her. A man wanted a wife whose beauty turned heads, not one who disappeared into shadows. He laughed as he spoke it, walked away before she could gather her trembling hands to answer. His words lay on her chest like a stone, and she carried it out into the night. She wept then, her face buried against the warm flank of a mare. The horse breathed slow and steady, as though it alone would listen. Into the animal's mane she whispered the words again, the cruel chorus she could not escape. "I'm not beautiful enough." Unbeknownst to her, someone else had heard. A man stood beyond the stable's half-door, quiet as dusk itself. He was not of a loud, swaggering kind, nor was his gaze quick to roam. He watched with a stillness that was not prying but patient, as though he feared to disturb the fragile moment unfolding before him. He was a rancher, 32, broad-shouldered but with a gentleness that clung to his movements. His hands bore the roughness of rope and plow, yet his eyes softened at small things others overlooked, the way a bird lingered on a fence post, the way a tired dog curled beneath a wagon. He had lived long enough to know that silence carried more weight than talk. He had buried a brother in hard earth, lost his parents to fever, and kept his land alive with nothing but calloused will. Perhaps that was why he noticed her, the girl who seemed made of strength hidden beneath softness, a willow bending, but not breaking. He did not step forward that night. He let her grief pass, leaving her the dignity of not being watched. But from that moment, he began to notice her more. He saw how she picked up a stray dog outside the butcher's shop, her thin arms cradling its shivering body as though it were worth more than gold. He saw her offer the last of her bread to a barefoot child. He saw her singing softly in her native tongue by the creek, the melody carrying like smoke through the air. And he wondered how others failed to see what he saw so plain. He began to linger near where she worked. If she fetched water, he happened to be drawing from a well, and would leave the rope steady in her hands. If she gathered firewood, he dropped a bundle near her door without a word. If she sat weary by the fence, he placed a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth within reach and walked on. At first, she mistrusted him. She thought perhaps he pitied her, and pity was no gift she wanted. She spoke little when he was near, eyes lowered, shoulders braced. But slowly, in the rhythm of small gestures, her guard loosened. He never pressed her with questions. He never asked for more than she was willing to give. He was simply there like a tree that stood through storm and sun alike, unmoving yet sheltering. One evening, the stars spread like spilled salt across the black of the prairie sky. She sat outside her door, arms wrapped around her knees, staring upward as though the heavens might answer where the earth had failed. Her lips trembled with the same old confession, softer now, but no less heavy. "I'm not beautiful enough." The words reached him as he passed on his way home. He stopped listening, his heart aching with a recognition he had not expected. He walked closer, slow enough not to startle her, and when he reached her side, he did not speak at once. Instead, he removed his coat, warm from his body, and draped it gently over her shoulders. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of crickets and the far-off cry of a night bird. At last he spoke, his voice low, steady as a river. "I see more than beauty when I look at you." She froze, the weight of his words pressing against her heart. She did not lift her eyes to meet his, for she feared to find mockery there. Yet something in his tone, the plainness, the absence of anything but truth, left her trembling. The night seemed to pause with her, holding its breath. She could not speak. He did not push her to. He only stood there a moment longer, the coat around her like a shield, then turned and walked into the dark, leaving her with a silence that felt less like loneliness and more like waiting. And for the first time in many nights, her tears did not fall. The morning after he placed his coat upon her shoulders, the air smelled of rain, though no clouds touched the sky. She woke early, as she always did, her body tuned to hardship, but something in her chest had shifted. The memory of his words lingered, gentle, steady, carved with the plain strength of truth. She tried to push them aside, yet they clung like dew upon grass, quiet and undeniable. The days that followed unfolded with small threads of change. She found herself at his ranch, first to repay the bread he had left, then to mend a torn sleeve he had not asked her to fix. His land stretched wide, fields patched with wildflowers between weathered fences, cattle moving slow in the golden light. She worked there as though she belonged, her hands learning the rhythm of tasks she had never known, grinding grain, feeding hens, patching harness leather with patient care. He did not tell her what to do. He simply moved alongside her, showing by quiet example, leaving space for her to step into. Their companionship grew not from grand words, but from silence shared. He would chop wood while she stacked it, the thud of the axe blending with the scrape of bark. He would mend a fence while she carried nails, their shadows stretching long together as the sun dipped west. At the hearth, when she hummed old songs, he did not interrupt. He listened as though those melodies were more precious than firelight itself. There were moments when laughter slipped between them, like an unlooked-for gift. She laughed once when a hen darted between his boots, scattering feed, and he, slow to smile, allowed one to bloom on his face like dawn breaking over the hills. It startled her, the warmth of it, for it lit him in a way she had never seen another man glow. Her heart stirred uneasily, caught between fear and yearning. Yet the world beyond their quiet circle did not keep still. In town, whispers swirled like dust storms. Some marveled at his kindness, though few believed it would last. Others smirked, saying he must be desperate, too long alone on his land to know better. A widowed neighbor, sharp-eyed and sharp-tongued, stopped her near the well one day. The woman spoke with feigned concern, telling her men's hearts were restless and their eyes fickle. Beauty, she said, was what held a man's gaze, and beauty was a coin the girl did not carry. The words sank deep, reopening wounds she thought had begun to close. That evening, she kept her distance from him, hands trembling as she baked bread, unsure if she should remain on his land or slip away before rejection came. He noticed, of course, his eyes catching her hesitation, though he said nothing. He gave her space, trusting the storm within her to pass. But inside, doubt gnawed at her. She heard again the ranch hand's cruel laughter, her brother's cold dismissal, the town's whispers. The test came not long after, during a gathering in the square. Lanterns glowed, music played, and townsfolk filled the street with dance and talk. She stood near the edges, uncertain whether she belonged. He was at her side, his presence steady, though he did not press her into the crowd. Then the ranch hand, the very man who had once sneered at her in the stable, swaggered forward. His voice carried, loud enough for all to hear. He jeered that the rancher must have grown blind or desperate to take in a woman so plain, so unworthy of a man's pride. Laughter scattered from the bystanders, cruel and thin. Her face burned. She fled before the music could drown the humiliation, tears blurring the lantern light into streaks of fire. Down the dirt street she ran, her breath breaking, the same old refrain rising like bile. "I'm not beautiful enough." She whispered it, shouted it inside her chest, cursed herself for believing otherwise. But he did not let her vanish into darkness. He followed, long stride steady, until he found her near the livery where shadows gathered. She turned, ready to hide her face, but he caught her hands and held them firm, grounding her trembling body. She tried to pull away, ashamed, yet he would not release her. Before all who lingered, before the jeers still hanging in the night, he spoke. His voice was not raised, but it carried with the weight of truth, silencing the scattered laughter. He told her he had waited years, through loneliness and toil, for a woman whose soul shone brighter than the prairie stars. He told her she was the beauty he had prayed for, the one who brought warmth into silence, who softened the hard edges of his days. Beauty, he said, was not the curve of a cheek nor the glitter of an eye, but the courage to remain gentle in a world that pressed hard upon the heart. The crowd stilled. Lantern light flickered across faces caught between shame and awe. She stood frozen, her tears falling not from pain now, but from a trembling release. The rancher's words struck deep, reshaping the wound inside her, filling it with a truth she had never dared to imagine. For the first time, she believed she was not merely enough. She was wanted, chosen, seen. From that night forward, the whispers of the town lost their teeth. Some softened toward her, some stayed silent, but none could undo what had been spoken beneath the stars. She walked no longer with eyes cast down, but with quiet strength, her hands sometimes brushing his as they moved together through the market or across the fields. In time, beneath the cottonwoods that lined the creek, vows were spoken. The ceremony was simple, no grand procession, only the wide sky, the murmur of water, and a circle of those who had come to care. She wore a dress not new, but mended with love, each stitch a testament to survival. He stood beside her, steady as ever, his hand closing around hers with the promise of shelter, not only of body, but of spirit. When the words were spoken, when the bond was sealed, sunlight spilled golden through the branches, crowning her in radiance she no longer denied. She whispered to him, voice soft yet certain, that she had once thought herself not beautiful enough, but in his eyes she had found more than beauty. She had found home. He answered not with more words, but with a look, one so steady it bound them tighter than any vow. The gathered few cheered softly, and the wind carried their joy through the fields. And so the tale found its rest, though it never truly ended. For in the quiet ranch, in the days that stretched into years, love bloomed not from fleeting passion, but from rooted trust, from kindness shared in silence, and words spoken only when they mattered most. She learned that beauty was never meant to please the eyes of many, but to be treasured by the heart of one. And if you, listening now, have ever believed yourself not enough, remember her. Remember the girl who whispered her shame into the night, and the man who answered with truth. Know that the world is cruel in its judgments, but love is patient, waiting like. If this tale touched your heart, ride along with us. Subscribe for more Wild West stories whispered by the fire.